I've been trying to grow fruit in my garden, including peaches and apples. In previous videos, I've shared my struggle with getting my peaches to grow and ripen after fruit set without withering out and dying from insect damage or even by fallen branches breaking the tree. But I still have had more luck with the peach trees since they have grown well and flowered profusely and even set a lot of fruit this season. It is another story for my apple trees. One of them has grown tall but has not flowered much, and the other looks a bit stunted. I had previously trimmed up a tree that had been casting shade, but I felt something else was an issue due to my neglect. There is another factor that might be inhibiting the growth of the apple trees, and that's all of the weeds that are growing underneath it. I sort of neglected them since I've planted them a few years ago, but now I need to make sure that I chop and drop. For that, I'll use a hand hoe that I bought. But before I do that, I do need to sharpen it, because if you don't sharpen your tools, your work is going to be unsafe and ineffective. While you may be tempted to think that working with a dull tool is safer, the reverse is usually true, because the mechanical advantage of the tool will be compromised if it's not sharp, and that could lead you to put more force than you need, and that just creates situations where you could harm yourself. Learning to properly sharpen a tool is a bit of a skill. I can't say I'm an expert, but the little I do already helps a lot. Usually tools come unsharpened for safety reasons. Obviously they're in the store, but you should, as much as you can, get to sharpen them before you start working. And sharpening is really not that hard. It's not as hard as some people make it out to be in some manuals or shop classes back in the 60s, I suppose. You just need to use circular motions and keep at a constant angle here on one side and then flat on the other. That's basically it. You can use oil or water to sharpen metal, and it's probably best if you're using one of these sharpening stones. It's what's recommended. But because I'm not looking for something that's going to be razor sharp, it's not going to matter too much for me. It is more a matter of patience and perseverance than anything. You can rest the tool you are sharpening against the edge of the bench to help you maintain a stable angle with the stone. The goal is to have a uniform, smooth, tapering edge that is shiny throughout. A shallow angle is what you want on the one side to create a wedge. On the reverse side, it must be flat. So in essence, you're only removing any burrs that may have formed from sharpening the front. I remember reading once that an orchard that has ground cover of just plants, weeds basically, contrary to popular belief, actually had less problems with flies and worms and other insect pressures. So keeping things tidy might not be the best when trying to prevent disease organically. At the same time, having plants grow so closely to the foot of a tree is bound to create competition. So because of this tree is still small, I can't just let things go totally wild. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting them and then chop and drop. That way their nutrients come back to the tree and hopefully goes into creating new apples that I can then enjoy, hopefully. I can't vouch for that information. Maybe it is right, maybe not. That is why I'm experimenting. One good thing about just being a home gardener is that there are no pressures to succeed. Your livelihood isn't tied to a successful crop like a market gardener or farmer would be. And while the advice they heed
may give them the results they want. Having gardening as a hobby allows you to be creative and find new ways of getting food through relative neglect by pushing the boundaries. In the next block, I'll show what happened to my other fruit trees, the peaches. Was I headed for an absolute failure? Right after this commercial. If you're loving the video and would like to help me produce more, you can purchase an original painting from my Etsy shop or support me through Patreon. Your direct support is the reason why I have been able to produce 2 episodes a week during the spring, so thank you. As summer passed its peak of heat and light, I saw some glimmers of hope from the distance. There were distinct reddish dots in my peach trees, which could only mean ripe peaches. At first I was rather skeptical the peaches would amount to anything after the nylon pantyhose experiment fiasco, but nonetheless, I could not argue with the reddish globes hanging from the trees. But alas, my hopes were to be dashed once more as I inspected the peaches closer. While a few looked good, many of them had developed a fungal infection, rotting the other hemisphere just as the rosy cheeks put up a facade of health and vigor. This looked like the telltale signs of brown rot. It destroys stone fruit like peaches and can be quite complicated to deal with, as is common with most fungal diseases. Luckily, it is not a lethal disease and can be remedied. It especially thrives when weather is warm, around 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and wet, which pretty much describes Maryland summer weather. To prevent this disease, it is recommended to keep things clean around the tree and to remove old mummified diseased fruit. I suppose that would go especially against what I talked about in the previous block, but I think my main issue was that these trees were not receiving the necessary amount of sun and were squeezed against older, taller trees. That was a recipe for disaster, and if I didn't start taking a less laissez-faire approach to fruit tree management, I would never get to taste anything from these trees. But since hope is the last thing to die, I still had hope for the remaining surviving fruit that appeared healthy. I may be a pessimist, but I am a hopeful pessimist. By the middle of July, I went to check the peach trees, especially the older trees that appeared healthier. Maybe I would be lucky enough to get at least something, despite being far from picture perfect. The fruit felt softer and there was a peachy smell in the air.
Alright, I'm really excited. This is the first peach I'm gonna try from this property. Frankly, it's not a tree that I grew, but still, it's just amazing to be able to grow food and eat it. I can't wait to see how this tastes. It has a very peachy scent. I don't know how ripe it's gonna be. This one is not particularly rosy. It doesn't seem to be sun-kissed. It was a bit covered by the leaves. And while there may be a few insect bites, it looks edible. So let's give it a try. I think it's a white peach. Yep. It is already sweet, but it has a very peachy fragrance. Yeah. The skin is very hairy. There's a few insect bites I'm trying to avoid, but this one is not as sour as some of the peaches are, and it's probably because it's a white peach. But this is a huge win. I was completely discouraged, especially because I saw that several of the peaches, as you can probably see, they have this fungus that attack them. Many of them have dropped to the ground. But this gives me hope that perhaps if I clean up the area around it, take out all the weed trees that are blocking this and really take care of this tree, it could potentially produce really well. So I almost thought I had lost it this year, despite the great pollination we had. And frankly, from all the trees that I planted that weren't quite established, the peaches don't look good. But these are legit. I'm happy.
I may not have hit the mother lode, but this humble offering was a sign. Perhaps it was nature's way of proposing a truce. I could translate it like this: have a little faith and care for the things you have tamed. It will take effort and hard work, but you must collaborate with me, not try to control me. My gifts are free and abundant, not for those who have merit and power, but for those willing to listen and observe. I know there are hardships and hurdles, and your kind has waged war against me to gain control. You fail to see that your jabs are self-inflicted wounds because you are part of me.